In-Sanity, the podcast where we look at everything mind, body, health, balance. And sanity comes from the word sanus, which means balance or health. So, do you want to be insane or out of sane? And today's talk, we're having a look at ADHD and can ADHD be cured and what ADHD actually means. So, beyond the attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And really, ADHD's a multifactorial condition shaped by genetics, learned behavior, or a lack of learned behavior, and environmental influences, and potentially evolutionary traits as well. So, is ADHD purely something innate, or can focus and will be actually trained despite any predispositions we may have? The latest research in this is looking at genetic and hereditary factors and neurodivergent wiring, neurobiological contributions to this disorder, if it is even a disorder. And, there's a potential here because people have the same genetic markers but don't exhibit ADHD. So, is there a level of epigenetic expression, which is when the genes express themselves based on environmental and sort of like life events? Certain genes will switch on and switch off. And this is, potentially part of what's going on here. But, as I say, some people can have these markers in their genetic code and not exhibit ADHD and be perfectly able to focus. So what's going on there? And when we look at things like the neurodivergent wiring that happens with people with ADHD, is this neurodivergent wiring a result of the lack of focus or the lack of ability to focus the attention? Or does the neurodivergent wiring cause this? And this is some of the stuff that we're going to be having a look at today. So first off, I just want to cover the fact that learning to focus is something that we have to do as children. And when we're born, our focus is directed by biological needs. So the need for food, liquid, to have a clean nappy, these sort of things. So at some point in our childhood, we learn to be able to direct our focus of attention. And this can be more difficult if we have an unstable environment or we have our attention being pulled by smart technology and shiny things. So with the ideas put forward by Dr. Gabor Mate, for instance, he's linked childhood trauma to ADHD. And while this may be valid for generations gone past, it's not so valid in this day and age. So it may be a little bit of a red herring. And I think that the lack of stability and potential trauma in childhood can lead to an environment where that focus of attention is not developed in a way that it may be in someone who's classed as neurotypical. But that doesn't necessarily mean that trauma causes ADHD. It's just one of the potential contributing factors to it. Other factors may be things like smart technology in this day and age. Screens are everywhere. We're constantly being bombarded with things that are designed to grab our attention, advertisements, things like that. That was much less prevalent like 50, 100 years ago. So we need to take these things into account as well. And we've also got this potential for hereditary learning. So if your parents have never been able to focus very well, if they have the ADHD type symptoms themselves, or if you've never been trained to focus, in this day and age, there's less and less emphasis on learning these skills. And these skills are something that have been developed in pretty much every esoteric tradition around the world. So there is practices for developing focus of attention, developing the willpower and these sort of things. And when we look at that, we can see that there's a clear path to developing focus to a level beyond even the normal person's levels of focus. I've done quite a lot of these practices myself and worked on my own issues. I've got high functioning autism and ADHD type traits when I was younger. And by using these sort of practices, I've been able to do a great deal of work on this, which I'll go into a little bit more later on. So there's this evolutionary perspective as well that I wanted to just cover. And if we think about it, the hunter-gatherer roots from our early human evolution, if you're in a survival situation, like say you're in the middle of a jungle and there's wild animals around, things like that, you need to be hyper aware of the stuff around you. You need to be careful when you engage focus. And the hyper focus that comes with ADHD and other neurodivergent disorders, if we want to call them that, neurospectacular is probably a better way of putting them, because they have more data points to process. And they can process those extra data points, which is really cool. But, if you can do the hyper-focus thing, then you'll be really good at the hunt. You'll be really good at gathering specific foods at specific times of years and things like that. So the ADHD symptoms become a gift in this hunter-gatherer scenario. And one of the things that comes up time and again with the clients that I've worked with over the last 15 odd years is the people that come to me with problems with ADHD-like symptoms tend to be highly creative. They're artists, musicians, like race car drivers, these sort of things, people that play sports. They've found a way of accessing and activating that hyper focus and the creative mind that comes along with this extra data points that come in with the neurodivergent wiring that's allowed them to excel in certain areas of life. But they still maybe can't focus in other areas of life because they've not developed the ability to control that focus. They're using something else to control the focus. So, this sort of aspect of ADHD and the symptoms that go along with it can actually be a real benefit in these creative sides of human expression. So a good thing to point out here is that if you develop the will and focus, it doesn't take away those things. You won't lose your creativity by learning to focus. It's still there. You've trained that faculty. It's like, if we look at sort of two main branches of meditation, for instance, there's focus-based meditation where we're focusing on a mantra, focusing on breath, focusing on a heartbeat, this sort of thing. And there's also a different type of meditation where we're training the creative faculty through exercises like image streaming or storytelling and these sort of things. And they develop different sides of our psyche, so to speak. So the learning of how to direct your focus and access control of the will is really something that can be an addition to your creative outlets without causing any detriment to them at all. There's also, research showing that there's potentially a gut-brain connection issue going on in these sort of things. And so when we look at this, certain foods might be linked to an increase in hyperactivity. My mum, bless her soul, used to, she spoke to the shop down in the village where we used to get the bus to school and asked them not to sell me a specific type of juice, because if I bought this, it was blue bubblegum juice, like raspberry flavored bubblegum juice. It was like, had this blue coloring in it. And sugar in general, like, simple sugars I would just go crazy. I was like fully hyperactive with that sort of stuff. So she banned the shop from selling it. But, if we look at balanced diet that's high in omega-3s for brain health and probiotics for gut health and, whole good quality foods instead of processed foods. If If you can't make it in your kitchen, it's probably not food. So we can use all this as part of a holistic strategy to help with the symptoms of ADHD and also help us work towards developing focus and will. So another thing that seems to be quite prevalent in this day and age is medication. And people look for a pill that's just going to fix them. And yes, you can use these ADHD meds to gain a level of focus, but it's effectively robbing from tomorrow to give you focus today. You know, so what a better way would be of using these medications is, yes, use them to help you focus, but then at the same time, train your focus through these different practices that, as I say, have been around for thousands of years in some cases in various different schools around the world. So, when we start to look at this, we can really start to create a holistic training program for our mind and body to learn to be able to direct that focus in a way that's beneficial and manageable for us. And it doesn't take a huge amount of effort, but it does take some effort. So we can include neurofeedback, mindfulness, hypnosis, and various different techniques, including some of these ancient practices that include things like meditation that have been in various different schools of thought all over the world. And we can use modern technology like things like the Roxiva RX1 strobing light machine, brainwave entrainment, binaural beats, these sort of things to help us entrain to a specific brainwave state that's more beneficial for rewiring the brain in these sort of ways. So deliberate practice in this can really have a profound result, and the specific tricks and techniques and ways to go about that'll make it easier and faster to achieve. But one of the things to really be aware of is the fact that the neuroplasticity of our brain is something that's really with us our whole life. We can learn the art of memory and focus and things like that right up into our 80s and 90s. And what wires together fires together. So, this takes me back to this idea of, is that neurodivergent wiring that's in people with ADHD's minds actually a result of the ADHD rather than the cause? And I think there's quite a lot of this in sort of Western medicine where we look at, this is happening in the brain, so that must be the cause. And they're not really going, this is happening in the brain. Is that a cause or a result of this particular way of thinking or a way of being? So by combining sort of genetic, environmental, nutritional, and behavioral approaches in a sort of combined therapeutic work, we can really start to shift and change and grow in ways that are beneficial for our life, whatever that might be. So I'd like you to take a moment and just have a think back across your life and ask yourself the question, was I influenced by people around me who had a lack of focus? Did I learn from people that weren't very good at being able to focus well? And also, have I developed focus consciously myself? Did I take the time to actually put in the effort to learn to focus? I was terrible at focusing at school. The teachers didn't know what to do with me. They kept on moving me from foundation to credit and credit to foundation because they couldn't work out if I was learning disabled or highly intelligent. And when I left school, I learned how to teach myself. I learned the art of memory. I learned how to make things interesting for me through curiosity and how to absorb information really quickly. So take a little bit of time and have a look at your life and see if this is something that rings true for you. Start meditating, like even if it's just 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, sit and focus on your breath. And if thoughts come up, just let them go and go back to focusing on your breath. Or pick a mantra. There's literally thousands of them out there, from a simple Om to, some crazy Sanskrit phrase or whatever suits you. But find something to focus on. The Ho'oponopono, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you, is a really good one to start with if you want a place to go, because it'll help you work on internal stuff as well as having that focus. But, pick something to focus on and focus on it. Now, I take this to an extreme because I'm that sort of guy. So I have, like business cards with a black spot on them taped to walls that I sit and focus at for sometimes up to an hour at a time and things like that to develop my focus and will. I've done things like, taking an object that's not very interesting for me and studying it in depth for, up to an hour, a couple hours, to look at all of the little things, picking up a stone and feeling it until I know it so that I can drop it back into a pile of pebbles and pick it back out again and find it blindfolded and things like that. So these are some of the ways that you can do this. There's a whole host of them. If you want help, give me a shout. My contact details will be somewhere around. And this is what I do. I help people with this sort of stuff all over the world. So, give me a shout if you want some guidance, but take the time to actually learn how to focus, because it's something that we have to train, and most people don't do that. So if you're on ADHD meds, great, but use them to help you learn to focus without them. You don't want to be wearing a plaster for the rest of your life. You want that wound to heal. You want to be able to grow past the obstacle. And the good news is that you've made it this far. Everything that's come up in your life so far, you've managed to overcome. So this is just another one of those things. But can it be cured? Yes. And what is it? I think it's a lack of developmental learning and the ability to focus and direct the will and attention. So I hope this has been helpful. Chuck us a like, a follow, click the little bell so you get informed of any new videos, any new stuff that I put out. And I hope to hear from you soon.